Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla. I am a fantasy writer and all-around creative. And if you are not familiar with me or the projects that I'm currently working on, I am in the middle of editing the third draft of my pirate fantasy novel. It's currently called Between the Waves. I began writing this book back in November of 2021 for NaNoWriMo, and I am still writing it. I have been doing a lot of editing, and one thing that I've noticed that I run into is I have a lot of ideas. And while that is a wonderful thing, it can still cause a lot of trouble because when you're actually editing down a book to try and make it as concise and strong as it can possibly be, it becomes an issue when you have overflowing ideas and you struggle to cut down on those ideas and decide which ones need to stay and which ones just aren't serving the story. And recently, after 2 years of taking writing classes and getting feedback from people and working on my craft, and also getting feedback from an editor in the form of a manuscript critique, I have finally started to come up with some strategies for myself to help me kind of whittle down the ideas that I put into a story in order to decide which ones to keep, which ones to get rid of, which ones to kind of like put on a back burner just in case I might use them. And I wanted to share some of those strategies with all of you. I think making the decision for what ideas to keep in your stories and which ones to kind of get rid of can be very, very difficult. You really need to make a lot of sacrifices as far as ideas go in order to make the manuscript and the story the strongest and most concise that it can be. Also, take everything I say with a grain of salt. If you don't think it's going to work for you, then don't use it. This is more just a video to break down some of the strategies that I use when I'm really struggling with decision making around my ideas, around my content ideas for the story. But at the end of the day, I just like to write silly little fairy tales that one day I will publish, but I am by no means an expert in the craft. So again, these are kind of just things that have been working really well for me as someone who has a lot of ideas, gets very attached to ideas, and is also extraordinarily indecisive. So the first thing I ask myself, and I have to get real honest right off the bat, is why did I pick this idea? And I know that sounds very broad, but what I mean is just like, can I remember where this idea came from? Can I remember what inspired the idea or why I had initially added the idea? What purpose was it supposed to serve? And the reason that that's important for me specifically is because as an avid reader, there are ideas that I tend to gravitate towards because they're ideas and tropes and dynamics that I just really like reading about. So naturally, I want to write about them as well. So I tend to ask myself, is this idea part of a favorite trope of mine? Was this idea inspired by another book that I was reading at the time that I really enjoyed? Did it come from a trend that I saw on social media or found from another author? Or did this idea flow from the creation of the manuscript that it exists in? It gets you thinking about why the idea came in the first place and what you had intended to do with it. It also reminds me that there are certain tropes and trends that probably come from the media that I'm consuming at that point in time. And I think that if I can find the origin of that idea and it stems from something more removed from the book itself, like from external media, it almost makes the decision feel a little bit more objective because I can see why I was attached to the idea in the first place, and now I can think logically if this idea actually needs to be in this story or if I've just tried to shove it in there because it's a story element that I really love myself. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with taking tropes and trends from popular media that you really love to read about and that you want to tell stories about, but you just have to make sure that they fit in the book that you're working on. Because I think that people can really tell if you try to force certain ideas into the book that you're working on based on trends that were popular at that time from other pieces of media. So yeah, the first thing that I do is I try to figure out where the idea came from, what was its origin, and I try to just get some context for myself around why I'm so adamant about keeping this idea in the first place and why I'm so attached to it. The next two things that I do have to do with context within the manuscript itself. So the first thing that I do is I ask myself about the world context, and then I also ask myself about the character context. These two processes for like vetting an idea kind of go hand in hand just because they interact with each other quite a bit throughout a manuscript and throughout a story. So when it comes to world context, what I mean by that is just asking yourself if the idea even makes sense in the context of the world. So socially, culturally, politically, geographically, spiritually, does this idea actually fit into the world that you've spent so much time building and creating? As far as the magic system goes, is there going to be a problem with making this idea fit within the magic system? Politically, does this idea, this thing that you want to happen in the story, does it even make sense for it to happen politically, or are you gonna have to like write a whole extra layer of context just to make this idea work within the world that you're already happy with? So I ask myself that, and then I also ask myself if it fits with the context of the characters that I have, which makes sense, but I feel like you'd be surprised how many times I try to get my characters to do things that it just, when you really like dig deep, it doesn't make sense for them to be doing that. So like, does it make sense for your character to use that idea that you've come up with and drive the plot in a natural way, given the context that you've already set up for your character? This also involves really knowing your character well, which is why, as I've learned, it's very, very important to really like dig into your characters and fully understand them, especially if you want character-driven plot, which for me, that is like above everything else. So yeah, does it make sense for my character to even act on this idea, or is there a way for me to include this idea that it contextually makes sense with who my characters are and what they're doing? And the reason that this overlaps with world context is because you also have to ask yourself, can I make this idea work in a way that feels natural with my characters and how I've developed them, but also with my characters within the world that I've developed? Because again, all of the world building pieces are going to affect how your characters act, because that is how they grew up. This is the world that they grew up in. This is where they live. This is what the rules are. So usually checking the context of the world and the context of the characters against an idea that I'm like trying to force in will really help me see if there's actually a way for me to make this idea work naturally. If it's not going to work naturally, you can always try and find a variation of the idea, or just put that idea on the back burner and use it in another story where contextually it just makes more sense. The next thing that I do kind of takes, all of these steps can build on top of each other. I feel like I use a variation of all of these different strategies to try and help myself decide what to do with an idea. And again, you got to keep in mind that I'm very indecisive, and every single one of my ideas is a darling to me. So it's really difficult for me to let go of ideas that I'm very attached to. So my fourth strategy is kind of broad, but the idea is to just get really honest with myself and ask myself if this idea is actually going to make the story stronger. If there is a way that I can include this idea into the manuscript that is genuinely going to improve the manuscript. And in order to do this, you have to know what your character motivations are. You have to think about the promise that you made and established at the beginning of the book. And then you have to sit down and ask yourself if including this idea is actually going to make the manuscript stronger in all of those areas. So one way that I do this, because again, asking myself, is it going to make the manuscript stronger? I feel like I'm very good at convincing myself that I can find a way to help it make the manuscript stronger, when in reality, sometimes an idea just needs to get scratched. So this is where I do get a little bit of my logic brain involved, and I will literally make like a pros and cons list. And that pros and cons list basically just outlines how this idea will affect the story as it is currently written, and how it affects the story based on like my ideal finished product. So for example, maybe a pro or a positive of including a certain idea is that if this conversation happens, it is like the first inkling that the main character gets that the belief they have about themselves is wrong, or that they've lied to themselves about something. And since that's usually one of the first plot points, that's important. So maybe that idea serves a really important part, because if I keep this conversation that I've had an idea for, it really like starts to clue the main character into the idea that maybe they're believing a lie about themselves, and they need to kind of like start thinking about that throughout the rest of the story so that they can complete their arc. Maybe a con or a negative of keeping this idea in the story is that in order for them to have this conversation, it will create a huge plot hole for this other part of the story. And then you kind of just have to weigh the pros and cons and be like, okay, is this idea going to be worth it to keep if it causes these issues within the story, but it fixes these issues or improves this character or improves the plot in this way or fills a certain plot hole. And my last strategy, I feel like, is kind of a cop-out for when I am still struggling to decide. And that is to literally just flip a coin and be like, if I get heads, then I'll keep the idea. If I get tails, then I'll get rid of the idea. The thing about making these kinds of decisions in stories, from what I've noticed, is that sometimes there is no right decision and it actually doesn't matter what you choose to do with the idea, but you just need to choose something. The thing is that sometimes we just need to force a decision and commit to either one path or the other, and then once we've done that and we've started working on the story again and we've gained momentum, usually we'll get clarity on if that path was correct or if we should maybe pivot path or try the previous idea or change our idea. I also just want to leave the video off on a couple reminders, including the fact that every wrong decision that you make is going to get you closer to the right decision. So that's why sometimes, rather than like sitting in paralysis over what the correct decision is to make around an idea that you have for your story, it's better to just make a decision, literally any decision, and then run with it and see where you get. Because I think that and just like continuing to work on it is better than getting paralyzed and just sitting in the same spot until it overwhelms you and then you feel like you can never move forward again because you have this one decision that you just cannot make. And also, remember that ideas, once you have an idea and you've written it down, you can actually always go back to it. You are always allowed to change your mind. There's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to change your mind 3 times, you're allowed to change it 1,000 times if that's what you feel like you need to do in order to make the story the best that it can possibly be, which is the end goal. So you're allowed to change your mind as many times as you want, and once you've had an idea and you've written it down, you can always go back to that idea. It's not like it's disappeared off into the void because you didn't use it in that moment. You can always go back and get that idea and try again with it if you realize that you've made the wrong decision. So yeah, I hope that that was somewhat helpful. I was expecting to make this a shorter video, but I got very, very chatty. But I hope that you all enjoyed it and that you got something from it. Like I said, I am absolutely no expert writer, but I just wanted to share some of the strategies that have worked for me and some of the things that I've learned over the past few years of like taking writing a bit more seriously, and some of the things that have helped me as a chronically indecisive human being that has far too many ideas. So thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to smile, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.